This morning on BRN, April marks an expansion of Social Security benefits. And we're going to welcome back to the program Andrew Biggs of the American Enterprise Institute. Andrew, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us on the program this morning.
Oh, thanks a lot. Happy to be with you again.
And you look very tanned and rested, Andy.
Freshly back from a week in Hawaii. So I am hand rested and jet lagged.
So let me ask you, when you're on vacation, do you still read about Social Security and retirement, or do you pick up a good book?
I read a lot of books while I was gone, but unfortunately, I also stick to work. I enjoy it. I find it interesting. So you never really.
Yeah, well, it's not. Look, Andy, it's not work if you love what you do, and obviously you love what you do, and you're good at it. What I thought we'd do, based on your expertise and experience working in SSA, I thought we would just kind of talk about some of the major issues going on with the Social Security Administration. Let's start out with one. I think you're going to have an opinion on this, but higher payments are going to start this month, and this refers to government employees that now have access to the Social Security benefit. I want to get your reaction to that and what, if any, details we should be thinking about, whether you're a public policymaker or a recipient.
Sure. Yeah. Right at the end of last year, after Christmas, Congress passed and President Biden signed the repeal of what's called the windfall elimination provision. And these were rules that would reduce Social Security benefits for public employees who participated in a government pension instead of Social Security. That's about 25% of state and local government workers. The vast majority have a pension on top of Social Security, but there's a smaller number who have a pension instead of Social Security. What happens, though, is the integration, non-integration of those pension rules with Social Security's benefit rules means that they could get windfall payments. Those were eliminated back in 1983. But the elimination of the windfalls happened the end of last year. And now Social Security is bringing those rules online, which for certain affected public employees is going to mean significant extra benefits. I've written in a number of places, I think it's just bad policy. Essentially, you're giving extra Social Security benefits to people who already have probably the most generous pensions in the
And
country.
Andy, I mean, apparently, and just looking at some of the numbers, I'm scrolling through, 3.2 million Social Security recipients will be getting a boost. And I wonder, what does it mean for the trust? So the trust fund, I think, is supposed to go bankrupt by 2035. So does having more people now receiving benefits further shorten that? Okay, well, you answer my question. Go ahead.
Sure. It's the Congressional Budget Office thought it would reduce the life of the trust fund by about 6 months. And it would also mean larger deficits to the program in all the years afterwards, because you're essentially paying people extra benefits without them having paid any extra taxes into the program. So this is not the worst possible thing that could happen to Social Security, but it takes Social Security's finances in a negative direction at a time that needs to be going in a positive direction. Moreover, there were really no strong argument based either on fairness or based on need, like preventing poverty, for making these extra payments. It was simply, public employees are a strong pressure group, and most members of Congress, to be frank, didn't really understand the provisions. They didn't understand the technical side of it, so they just voted for what was popular. So to me, it does not bode well for Social Security reform when it eventually does arrive.
Andy, anecdotally, it's always interesting to me, the naming of the bills. I don't know how they do this, but it's called the Social Security Fairness Act. But oftentimes when you look at what's actually in the bill, sometimes the name doesn't always align. I don't know how they do that, how they name it, but there must be a rule of thumb that they use. But it's kind of always interesting.
The sponsor gets to name it. And so you either name it something like the Social Security Fairness Act or the Mom and Apple Pie Act, or it usually has some acronym like the Secure Act for retirement is an acronym. which doesn't mean very much, but they should probably have some sort of computer program do it for you.
I was going to say they could have the congressional AI chat Congress GPT. Um, Andy, let's kind of fast forward now. So we talked about these enhanced benefits that are going to public sector workers effective this month. Let's talk about some other potential policy changes. The administration, the Social Security Administration, recently announced that it's going to curtail in-person. You're going to have to be in person to prove your identity. I want to get your reaction to that. It seems to make sense, but also if you live somewhere, maybe you can't drive. If you're 65 or older, you may not be able to go to your local Social Security office.
It's you have this group of DOGE staffers who've been embedded at the Social Security Administration for a couple months now, and they are very determined to weed out what they see as fraud occurring in the program. And one way in which they believe this can happen is people applying for benefits, applying for somebody else's benefits, claiming to be somebody other than who they are. Now, up until recently, if you call up on the phone to do this, you could confirm your identity over the phone and through a procedure that DOGE thought was not secure. So there's two ways of doing it. You can confirm your identity electronically using the internet by scanning documents, or now they're saying you have to go into a field office to do this. So they're trying to eliminate the phone option. Just recently, the Social Security Administration said, well, they've pushed off that change because they have gotten a lot of pushback that, especially, if you're in a rural area, you may have to drive hours to find the Social Security Administration field office. And so they were concerned that some people, if you're somebody who's applying for disability benefits, it may be tough to get to a field office. So, I sympathize of trying to minimize fraud. At the same time, you do want to, there's always costs and benefits you have to weigh against each other. And you want to think about the inconveniences and the costs you're imposing on people relative to what you think you're going to save the program.
Yeah, well stated. And Andy, also, they're talking about closing some of the Social Security offices. So you may have to drive farther, whatever, to get to that office. If the office near you is closed, that presents a challenge. And also, do they have the human capital? Because who's going to approve or check ID? Is it going to be a human being, or is it going to be AI or some other technology? I guess they could use like a DocuSign type of thing. I mean, there's other parts of government that use technology to look at your ID. But I guess all these things, it's like a confluence of factors when you think about some of these changes. You got to look at the human capital, but also the fact that you're closing offices could have a big impact.
Well, the office closures is another example of where DOGE and the Social Security Administration leadership seem to have differing stories. That DOGE on its website announced the closure of a number of Social Security Administration offices. SSA says field offices are not going to be closed. It's or at least the closure of are limited. I mean, look, there's a case to be made, and the Social Security essentially went to 100% remote work, which, in my opinion, is not a good policy for the productivity of the program. But that also meant you have a lot of real estate the Social Security is paying for that they're not using. You have meeting rooms which are used for remote hearings, which are just sitting there empty. And so maybe there's a case to be made for closing some of these places. At the same time, they're talking about closing some fairly major field offices, which were not for remote work, where people go in to get a Social Security number to file a claim. One thing worth remembering is, for most people, you think about Social Security, you think of retirement. And a retirement claim is easy to file. You can do most of it online. The Social Security already has your earnings records. You just have to show your birthday. It's a simple thing. Applying for disability benefits is a whole different kettle of fish. And so it's much harder for people to do that online. And so having those field offices open is necessary. And again, there's just trade-offs. of, they're labor intensive, they're costly. At the same time, in many cases, they're needed. So they need to find the balance.
It sounds like, so I think everyone would agree waste, fraud, abuse, you want to catch the bad actors. There's a balancing act here. But there's definitely concern, I think, from some who have to claim benefits. And I wonder if that softening of support, I'm not a pollster. I've never been polled in my entire life. I don't think I've ever gotten a phone call from a pollster. But I have to think that softening a little bit, or that concern, they say Social Security is a third rail, that might change some of these ideas, or at least extend out, for example, moving to technology, or finding ways to approve or adjust procedures. I could see that happening over 6 to 12 months.
It'll be interesting to see how things play. On the one hand, Donald Trump's positions on Social Security are well to the left of where a traditional Republican would be. I worked in the Bush White House. He wanted to fix Social Security's funding gap, as much as he could by reducing the growth of future benefits. Donald Trump has pledged he's not cutting anybody's benefits at any time, which means, it's all going to be on the revenue side. So he said, I'm not going to touch your benefits. And that's a politically advantageous position for him. On the other hand, though, they're doing a lot within the agency that's proved to be controversial. The question is whether, politically speaking, it sort of jumps the tracks, in the sense that most people don't care very much about what happens in a government agency, but are they going to perceive at some point this may threaten their own benefits? And I really think that remains to be seen. I think for most people, applying for benefits will remain pretty seamless. It's not going to be a problem, but there could be instances in which people need help and they can't get it. So we'll really have to just tune in and see how this plays out.
And based on our conversation last time about stories and news, you can certainly bet that if people have difficulty, the journalists will write about it, and we'll know if 1 out of 1,000 people has a challenge, right? I mean, that just, that'll get the clicks, that'll get the attention. That's ultimately driving, the eyeballs is what drives today's.
Sure, the media is going to drive this story. I get calls every day from reporters about this stuff. Now, these DOGE efforts are happening in other government agencies, but they're focused, the media attention is focused on Social Security, in part because that's something that's very salient to voters. Nobody cares what happens at USAID. They do care what happens at SSA. And so, there is that angle to things as well. So I think we just have to wait and see how it all plays out.
Yep, early days, but I guess something we will certainly keep talking about. It's going to be in the news, it'll be in the stories, and we like to avoid the hyperbole and spin. That's why we give great thought to our guests like Andy. Andy, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to bringing you back on the program again very soon.
Always good to be with you. Thanks a lot.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, for all the news in one place. Details, of course, at our website, and your subscription helps support all this great BRN content. And we're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.